Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, friends and society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me today. This theme is going to run through most of the program, in which we're going to be talking about the media. Second hour today, we're going to be talking about some of the concerns about sex and violence in the media. In between our interviews, we'll probably get back into the presidential campaign. Donald Trump actually issued his position statement on immigration, so we'll be talking about that and a lot of other issues that are on the table. But in this first half hour, we're just so privileged to have the individuals involved in so many films that we have really enjoyed over the years. Flywheel, Facing the Giants, Fireproof, Courageous, and now this new movie, War Room. And it is coming out shortly, and wanted to give you a chance to hear from the individuals who are responsible for it. We have two individuals with us. Alex Kendrick is the president of Kendrick Brothers Productions, and he has been co-writing as well as directing and editing these different films that we've talked about. He's acted in feature films and TV productions. Matter of fact, we have information about him and his pictures, so sometimes you can identify him in some of those films. And he joins us by phone, as well as Stephen Kendrick, who also is part of the project known as Kendrick Brothers and has been involved in these other films as well, working really to build strong and unified teams. And Alex and Stephen, just a great opportunity to have you on the program. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to be with you. Thank you.
One of the things that I think most of our listeners probably appreciate is the fact that you have been involved in so many of these previous films. And so, Alex or Stephen, I'll let one of you maybe go through those, because I would imagine most of our listeners, since we are mostly on Christian radio stations, have probably been to one or two of these, a Courageous or Fireproof or whatever. But for people that are saying, well, I'm not too familiar with the film series, Flywheel and Facing the Giants, Courageous, Fireproof, and now War Room, give us just a brief overview before we talk about this newest film.
In 2002, I went to our pastor at Sherwood Church in Albany, Georgia, and asked if we could make a low-budget feature film for the community and just to show in our one theater. And he thought it was a risky thing, but he said, let's pray it through, and if God is in it, we want to do whatever God wants us to do. And the Lord provided about $20,000 worth of funding from people just giving to it. It did not come out of the church budget. They just gave to the movie. We shot it with an entirely volunteer cast. That movie was Flywheel, and we got it in our one local theater, and I was thrilled that the Lord opened that door. We worked very hard, but He wasn't done, and God shocked us by allowing the movie to spread like wildfire. It has since sold about 1 million DVDs. It's been on several Christian television outlets, and it's been around the world in 56 countries, and the response overwhelmed us, specifically the changed lives. That led to Facing the Giants in 2006. That came out theatrically in a limited release. Sony put that out. And again, God did more with that football movie than we ever asked or imagined. It was on facing your fears with faith. Our third movie was Fireproof. It stars Unconditional Love and Marriage for fathers. And this new one, War Room, is on the power of prayer and how to fight in prayer. So this new one comes out August 28th here in America in over 1,000 screens.
million in domestic box office, won all sorts, of course, festival awards, top-selling DVDs globally, distributions in 76 different countries. And like I said before, we have information about both of you visiting the website and, of course, the official trailer that people can watch, which I would encourage them to do. Then we have the short that actually shows a little bit about the filming of the movie itself. So I think people will certainly benefit from that. And my goal here is to get as many people as possible. I know my Sunday school class is already planning on having everybody show up that first weekend. I'd love one of you to talk about the importance of that first weekend, because if you do well there, then it opens up the door for other movie theaters, doesn't it?
Absolutely. If you drop a pebble in a pond, it has little ripple effect. If you drop a big boulder in a pond, it could have a huge effect. An opening weekend is the size of that rock. If it does well opening weekend, they'll expand it to more theaters, more cities, reach more people with the movie. And so we encourage people to go see War Room on August the 28th or that weekend. And just like you're doing, our hope is that pastors, that church members will use this film to inspire the people around them to become more devoted to prayer. Because prayer can address every issue that we're dealing with in our culture right now. And when the church devotes itself to prayer, not only in Scripture, but historically in America, it can have a huge positive impact on our families and our nation.
Might just mention the video we've posted, that second one there, has some interviews each other for some time. Of course, his daughter is in the film. We'll talk more about that in just a minute, talking about the power of prayer. And I might just mention, for those of you that obviously have not seen the film yet, you can see a lot of the clips, and I think it will help you understand that there's a very compelling drama. There's some great humor, laugh out loud kind of humor in the midst of it as well. And it's certainly going to be, I think, a great encouragement to you. So we wanted to make sure that you all were prepared to show up, because, again, we've seen the success in the past of facing the giants when they've talked about faith. Certainly the whole issue of unconditional love and fireproof, and the whole challenge there. And then, of course, courageous, the idea of courageous parenting, some very important issues. One of the questions I'd love to ask of one of you is the difficulty of prayer. It's one thing to talk about faith. It's even easier to talk about love, because you can show unconditional love in a marriage or the lack thereof. Parenting, easy to show. Prayer is one of those sort of abstract concepts. I would think this may have been one of the biggest challenges that you've had yet.
You know, it is, and the interesting thing about prayer is that we need to be doing it at an individual level, a corporate level, and certainly at a kingdom level, meaning at a national level. But prayer needs to be the steering wheel of our lives, not the spare tire, only pulled out when we absolutely need it. And so prayer is a powerful weapon, and this whole concept of a war room we got from the military. And when the military goes to war, you know, they meet in their, the leaders meet in their war room. They assess what the enemy's doing, call in the resources, and disseminate their strategy to the troops in the field. In like manner, when we go to war in our issues, whatever they may be, we need to seek the Lord in prayer first and come up with those prayer strategies. So Scripture is full of ways you can pray for your marriage, your children, your church, and certainly our culture, and we need it now more than ever before. And so, again, this concept of war room is very important to us, and we hope that it inspires a lot of people to return to prayer.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation for just a few more minutes with Alex and Stephen Kendrick. And again, want to encourage you to go to our website and to their website, because we have a link to that as well, so that you can watch the trailer, maybe learn a little bit more about how it was put together. When we come back, we'll give you at least a little bit of an overview of what is actually covered there, because I think we won't be breaking any kind of confidentiality because of all the trailers out there. I think a lot of people know a little bit about what it's about, but we'll get into that. And most importantly, we're going to give you some action items. What can you do in your community? What can you do in your church? How can you make this successful and really begin to challenge first believers with the power of prayer, but then even challenge non-Christians to consider their circumstances and whether or not they need God and need to depend upon Him and His Word. So we'll continue our conversation with the Kendrick brothers right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Christians have been called to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ and make disciples of all nations. Unfortunately, three powerful social forces in society undermine the effectiveness of the gospel in this country and around the world. Writers such as Peter Berger and Os Guinness have documented and described these forces. They are secularization, pluralization, and privatization. The first is secularization. It is the process by which sectors of society and culture are removed from the influence of religious institutions and symbols. A biblical description of secularization can be found in Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Today, the forces of darkness raise up the arguments against the knowledge of God, which blunt the effectiveness of the gospel. A second social force is pluralization, which is the process that has increased the number of choices in the world. With so many choices, we do not know what is true. Ultimately, all truth and values become relative. People are taken captive by worldviews that are contrary to biblical teaching. Privatization is the third force. It occurs as a response to the previous two forces. It is the withdrawal from religious institutions and a retreat inward with an emphasis on self. It is what Christopher Lasch called an attempt at psychic survival. You know, the combined impact of these three forces on Christianity is to make it irrelevant, at least to the cultural and social aspects of society. Theodore Roszak once said that American Christianity is privately engaging, but socially irrelevant. So if Christians are to be effective in the 21st century, they must understand and counter these powerful forces. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Prayer is a powerful weapon. From Provident Films and Affirm Films comes War Room in theaters August 28. Rated PG. More information at warroomthemovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
You know, in the second hour, when we spend some time today talking with one of our guests from Parents Television Council, we're going to be talking about what's wrong with the media, sex, violence, all sorts of issues, profanity, false worldviews. And that's a time when I suspect, as I open up the phones, many of you will want to complain. I think legitimately so. But there's also a time to commend individuals doing a good job. And this new movie coming out, War Room, if you go to the website, warroomthemovie.com, we have a link to it on our website here. It reminds us that we're just 10 days and I guess 21 hours away from that. And I hope that you will make a very, very important and concerted effort to attend, to get other people in your sphere of influence to attend, because it sends a signal to Hollywood that we want more of those kinds of films. It is a way to actually put a pat on the back to Alex Kendrick and Stephen Kendrick for the work that they've done in some of the past movies like Flywheel and Facing the Giants and Fireproof and Courageous. This new one, of course, called War Room. And guys, I think this is exactly why we want to mobilize people, so that we send a signal to Hollywood and to other film producers that we're really looking for family-friendly films that, in this particular case and in every one of your films, have a very strong Christian message.
Well, we do want our movies to be entertaining, and just like the other films, if people liked Fireproof and Facing the Giants and Courageous, we think they're going to love War Room. They're going to laugh. They're going to get choked up in some very heart-wrenching scenes.
Yes.
But also the message of this film communicates very clearly that God does answer prayer. And when America was in dire straits in the past, believers would rally in prayer and God would show up in power. And we know that we need that right now desperately in our nation.
Well, let's see if we can just give a little brief overview of the plot, and it has to do with Tony and Elizabeth Jordan. And on the outside, looks like they're doing very well. They both have very successful jobs. He's in the pharmaceutical industry, and she's selling homes. They have a beautiful daughter. They have a beautiful house, on and on and on and on. But things are not all positive, and that gives her an opportunity as she's trying to sell a house to come into contact with a woman that challenges her, Miss Clara, to actually go to a war room, that is, to actually go to a prayer closet and to begin to pray about the issues before her.
You know, it's interesting when Miss Clara takes Elizabeth, the young wife, to see her prayer closet. She walks in. Elizabeth sees and responds the way many of us might respond. She looks around at all these prayer strategies, and she realizes how much Miss Clara prays on a regular basis. But she walks out of the war room, and she says, Miss Clara, I'm impressed by this, but I don't have that much time to pray every day. And Miss Clara says, but you apparently have time to fight with your husband every day. And she realizes that she must make it a priority to spend time with God and let God do the heavy lifting. We certainly have obedience to add to our priority list in a relationship with God, but God wants to do the heavy lifting. See, you and I can't change the heart of our spouse or anybody else. We can influence them to a degree, but God can touch and change the heart. And so when we pray and we seek the one who can do the impossible, who can do what we cannot do, that's the wiser choice, and God wants to be sought. So she teaches Elizabeth how to fight her battles in prayer, and when Elizabeth begins praying for her husband instead of fighting against him, God does some very interesting things in their relationship. And so we want to tell a very engaging story where people see, wow, I've been there before, and you watch visually on the screen how these characters apply the power of prayer to their life, knowing that Scripture calls us to do that and the difference it can make.
You know, Tony Evans and I have known each other for some time. We actually even shared an office at Dallas Seminary years ago. I've been at places like Pine Cove, where his son has been there. Last August, I spoke in his church every Wednesday night during August, and I've seen Priscilla grow up, but I never would have predicted that she would be an actress in your film, and I think she just did an outstanding job.
Well, and she had not predicted that either. When we called her and asked her to audition, she just laughed on the phone because Priscilla is such a dynamic, godly woman. She's an incredible speaker and author, and she has a very effervescent personality. And so when we got to know her working on the movie Courageous, we thought, you know, Priscilla Shirer would be the kind of person we would love to be the lead in our next film, because Alex had written this story about an African-American couple and what they're going through. And we wanted to entrust the platform of the film to someone who would leverage it to advance God's kingdom. So when we called Priscilla, she said, I'm not an actress. You know, why don't you hire somebody that's professional, you know?
Yes.
And we said, yes, but you have the personality and the heart we're looking for. And so she said, well, I'm willing to try. So she read the script. She loved it. And she started sending us videos that her husband was filming on his iPhone of her trying out acting in scenes. And Alex and I realized that she did have a raw talent. And so we brought in a professional acting coach who started working with her. She learned very quickly, and she does an incredible job in the film. No one would know it's her first film. And when you're looking up on the screen, you don't see Priscilla Shirer. You really see Elizabeth Jordan, and you're caught up in the story of War Room.
Well, I will testify to that. I had to keep reminding myself that it was Tony's daughter, you know, because you just get into the film very well. We only have a few minutes left, and I wanted to get either of you or maybe both of you to maybe give us our marching orders, because, again, I want to encourage individuals to visit your website. And, of course, we have that linked on our website here, pointofview.net. We'll take them immediately to warroomthemovie.com. We also, of course, have some of the video clips up there and the trailers and others, and I would encourage them to watch those and maybe post them on their Facebook page or their Twitter page or something like that, whatever they might be wanting to do, or just maybe even send it by an email to somebody else that needs to know about that. But I know it's really your hope that pastors and churches would get involved. So what can they do between now and when this film comes out?
Well, we do hope that churches will go in groups to see the film. You know, this movie is powerful enough to be a sermon in and of itself. And so even if churches said, hey, Sunday night we're going to get together and go see this movie, they won't regret it. It's something that points to prayer, that points to celebrating faith in God, that points to the sanctity of marriage and the powerful relationships we can have when they're devoted to the Lord, and how messed up they can get if they're not devoted to the Lord. So lots of life lessons there. But they can go to warroomthemovie.com, look at the resources. We have some Bible studies, curriculum, and books that go along with the power of prayer and how to develop a prayer ministry, how to strategically pray for your family and your marriage, your church, and our culture. That's all there at warroomresources.com. But you can go to warroomthemovie.com, and it's linked there as well. So we hope pastors use the film and these resources as ammunition and tools to teach their people how to pray and how to go deeper in their prayer life.
One more question, and that is, some of your films are just perfect to bring a non-Christian to. Fireproof comes to mind. I mean, anybody that has really been maybe struggling with their marriage, but also maybe doesn't know the Lord, that was a perfect movie. Not that Courageous and some of the others weren't as well. What about this one? A lot of people are going to be thinking, well, this is on prayer. I guess this is really more for the family of God. Or is it?
Well, our target audience is the church. However, the gospel is very clearly presented in this relationships, but they will hear a very clear presentation of the gospel. So we believe a peer, coworker that may be close to salvation but is not quite there, this movie will certainly give them something to think about and clearly present the gospel.
Well, you know, here at Point of View, we've had a Pray for America campaign going on for many months, so I was already all in because it's your guys' film, but even more so when I realized that it's one more way that we can recognize the power of prayer, to pray for our families, to pray for our community, to pray for our nation. So I certainly appreciate you putting together such a powerful film, and we're looking forward to what takes place on August 28th and following. So thank you so very much for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you, Kerby. God bless you.
We're going to take a break, and when we come back, if you'd like to join the conversation, we certainly will open up the phones. We'll let these guys get on with their busy lives. And if you have a comment about prayer or the movie coming out, War Room, we certainly would welcome that. But I'm going to get into some other issues in the news as well. After all, as I mentioned, Donald Trump has issued his position paper on immigration. It's about time to talk about that as well. And then we have some other news stories that are very important to cover as well. For some of our listeners in Rhode Island, a big challenge right now about the issue of election reform. So we'll probably get into that and an update on what's happening with these Planned Parenthood videos. So we just, as always, have so much to cover, and we will do our best to do so. So if you'd like to join the conversation, that number is 1-800-351-1212. If you'd like to sit back, that is fine. But as I mentioned earlier, we'll spend a little bit of time in the second hour today talking with our friends at Parents Television Council about this issue of sex and violence in the media and how the various forms of media have been responding to some of the concerns that people have. And so I think you'll find that conversation in the second hour certainly very relevant to some of the things we've been talking about here in the first hour. But let's take a break, and while we go to the website, pointofview.net, I want to encourage you to look at my Viewpoints commentary today on social forces in society. And also we are now beginning to promote the tour of Israel and Greece. I'll have more to talk about that a little bit later, but just a great opportunity for you to join with us at Point of View over in the Holy Land, or to go in the places where Paul walked. We'll be right back.
There is a big incentive to pay your electric bill. If you don't, you find yourself in the dark. But who pays to make sure you're educated on the key issues of the day, to bring you wisdom for life at work, at home, and in the culture, like you hear from guests here on Point of View? Who makes sure that our electric bill gets paid? You're way ahead of me, aren't you? That's right. You do. The truth is, if every listener this week gave just $5, we could pay our bills for about the next 3 years. Did you hear me? $5, 3 years. Now, perhaps you can give more. How about $50 or $500, maybe even more? But please, don't be the one who fails to send at least $5. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Whatever amount you chip in, thank you for your gift. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
If you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. Kind of an open line here for about a half an hour before we get into some other conversation topics. And I'm going to put on the table immediately what Donald Trump has released from his campaign. It is entitled Immigration Reform That Will Make America Great Again. Now, you've heard Donald Trump say before, we wouldn't be talking about immigration if it weren't for him. And I think that's a bit of a bluster. Let's face it, that certainly the publication of the book by Ann Coulter, Adios America, which has a lot of facts and figures, which I think show up in this position paper, by the way, as well as, let's face it, Jeb Bush has written a book on it, and Marco Rubio was part of an immigration reform package, whether you like those or not. This would have been one of the campaign issues, but let's give credit where credit is due, because he's made it a foundational issue. A lot of people have been waiting for this position paper, and it's out. And I've got it in front of me here, and you can read it as well. It is really based upon three principles that they talk about. Number one, that a nation without borders is not a nation. And that is an argument for a wall across the southern border. Number two, a nation without laws is not a nation. That is, laws passed in accordance with our constitutional system of government must be enforced. And number three, a nation that does not serve its own citizens is not a nation. Any immigration plan must improve jobs, wages, and security for all Americans. So let me take those in order. 1, 2, 3. As we go through this, I certainly welcome your phone calls if you would like to talk about Donald Trump, the issue of immigration, how he is doing, whether you have concerns about his candidacy, his personality. Certainly that is part of it. And in a minute, I'm going to get into how it was very interesting that after the first Republican presidential debates, both the afternoon one and the evening one, a lot of pundits had predicted, interestingly enough, that this would probably change American attitudes. Well, it did, but not in the way the pundits predicted it, because you basically find that in the first 5 people, that you have individuals who have never run a state government or a federal agency. And so that, I think, is kind of intriguing, because you have 3 individuals that are non-politicians, Donald Trump, Ben Carson, and Carly Fiorina. And then you have 2 others in that top 5, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, who are senators. In the past, we've always wanted to, in most of the cases, there have been a few exceptions, want a governor. So we've had people like Governor Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Governor Jimmy Carter and Governor Ronald Reagan and Governor Bill Clinton and Governor George W. Bush. And if you add to that some of the governors that were nominated but were not elected, Governor Michael Dukakis and Governor Mitt Romney, you can see that we've always sort of preferred somebody that has some kind of executive experience. And yet the top 5 right now on that particular poll, and of course that will change over time, but certainly those top 5, none of them fit into that category. So let's get into Donald Trump for just a minute, because that's kind of a key issue. And the first point is this issue of a nation without borders is not a nation. And so he says we should make Mexico pay for the wall. His argument is pretty simple. He says that there are pamphlets that Mexico has published on how to illegally immigrate to the United States. The position paper says the cost of the United States have been extraordinary. U.S. taxpayers have been asked to pick up hundreds of billions in health care costs, housing costs, education costs, welfare costs. Indeed, the annual cost of free tax credits alone paid to illegal immigrants quadrupled to $4.2 billion in 2011. And so he goes through and tells in the position paper some of the stories, but then a couple of the other facts and figures. 2011, the Government Accountability Office found that there were a shocking 3 million arrests attached to the incarcerated alien population, including tens of thousands of violent beatings, rapes, and murders. A little bit later in the document, he talks about how the Mexican government has taken the United States to the cleaners. They are responsible for this problem. They must help pay to clean it up. And he says basically that the cost in this position paper of building a permanent border wall pales in comparison to what the American taxpayers spend every single year in dealing with the fallout of illegal immigration. So the first point here, of course, is that a nation without borders is not a nation, and that Mexico should pay to build the wall. But either way, sort of obvious that he says we're going to build a wall. Number 2, the second point is a nation without laws is not a nation. And so here, the argument in the position paper is that you defend the laws and constitutions of the United States. For example, one of the proposals in this position paper is to triple the number of ICE agents. And that is important. No matter where you stand on this immigration issue, even if you believe that we should actually naturalize all the people that are here illegally, I've shared with you in the past how we just simply do not have enough ICE agents either to defend the border, to process all these visas and all the rest. And this is something that if we really are serious about, needs to take place. He also, like many others, talk about nationwide E-Verify to protect jobs for unemployed Americans, a mandatory return of all criminal aliens. His argument is that the Obama administration has released 76,000 aliens from its custody with criminal convictions since 2013 alone. Not sure about that number, but let's take it at face value. Then makes a further argument for detention, not catch and release, and then to defund sanctuary cities. Some of those, of course, could not be done, I don't think, with executive orders, would have to be done with Congress. And, of course, you'd have to ask if a President Trump, assuming he was elected, a President Trump would actually be able to enact all of that with Congress. But that's one of the key points. But again, a nation without borders is not a nation. Number two, a nation without laws is not a nation. Number three, a nation that does not serve its own workers first, which I find kind of intriguing, because if you look at it, what it seems to suggest at this point is that what actually would probably take place is that this would not so much be under the issue of immigration, but just under the issue of trade. But, okay, we're in a sense kind of deviating a little bit from the issue of immigration, but it's still important. And in this position paper, Donald Trump says that decades of disastrous trade deals and immigration policies have destroyed our middle class. Goes on to, in this piece, say, today nearly 40% of black teenagers are unemployed, nearly 30% of Hispanic teenagers are unemployed, and then goes and talks about how many of these trade deals have been disastrous for those particular individuals that are looking for an opportunity to get their first job and to get some job experience and some qualifications so that they would be able to advance and really achieve the American dream. He goes on to also make some statements in this position paper about a requirement to hire American workers first. The position paper says too many visas, like the H-1B, have no such requirement. And he says in the year 2015, with 92 million Americans outside the workforce and incomes collapsing, we need for companies to hire from the domestic pool of unemployed. Petitions for workers should be mailed to the unemployment office, not the USCIS. It will be interesting to see if he fleshes that out, what that really looks like. Does that mean that if I'm going to list a job opportunity or a job opening, I have to give preference to someone who demonstrates that they're American, an American citizen, over somebody who is here, perhaps even on a visa? And we'll see how that plays out. Two other real quickly, and then we'll take some of your phone calls. End welfare abuse. That is, applicants for entry to the United States should be required to certify that they can pay for their own housing, health care, and other needs before coming to the United States. Now, for some, that may sound really onerous, but that's what's required for many individuals that want to immigrate to other countries, even in our hemisphere. And then one last one real quickly. Job program for inner city youths. That there would actually be a visa jobs program for foreign youth will be terminated and replaced with a bank for inner city youth, provided all corporate subscribers to this particular program, and a number of other elements. I went through this fairly quickly, but we're coming up on a break. But if you'd like to join us, we'll open up the phones now and give you a chance to join the conversation, because certainly a couple of questions that are surfacing. Do you think that Donald Trump, by actually posting some of this now, has provided some specificity? Because up until now, a lot of people have said, well, it's just a lot of bluster, just a lot of sound bites. Well, now we've got 4 full pages of position papers on very specific and concrete steps. Is that more likely for you to vote for Donald Trump, or are you still not convinced? I'd love to get your comments, especially in light of the fact that right now, the American people seem to be saying, we just don't care that much about previous political experience, that political experience might actually be a negative rather than a positive, because if you look at the top 5, Donald Trump, Ben Carson, Carly Fiorina have no political experience, and the 2 that are in the remaining 5 are 2 senators, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio, that haven't exactly been in Washington for a very long period of time. So your thoughts. We'll open up the phones, give you a chance to interact on some of the issues we're putting on the table. 1-800-351-1212. We'll take your calls right after these important messages.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. I know many of you have been calling off air for more information about the movie interview that we did in the first half hour with Alex Kendrick and Stephen Kendrick. Again, the movie is called War Room, and it's coming out August 28th, and we have lots of information about it on our website, pointofview.net. I think this is just a great opportunity for us to create a positive buzz about a movie dealing with prayer, and certainly with a very good gospel message and Christian message. So again, if you'd like more information, visit our website, pointofview.net. Make it a point this next weekend, not the one coming up, but the one after, that is the weekend of August 28th, to go to that film, to bring your friends, neighbors, church members, and others so that we send a positive signal to Hollywood and to other film producers. Let's take some phone calls, and certainly a lot of issues on the table about presidential candidates and Donald Trump in particular and his immigration reform package. 1-800-351-1212. We'll head out to California first. Dean, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, how are you?
What would you like to add to the conversation?
I just think that presidential candidates don't necessarily have to have a political background per se, but I believe that they do need some perspective. They need a little bit more background than just maybe just a business background.
I think so. And again, let me be clear. We've had presidents in the past, when the government, by the way, was not so large, that didn't have a lot of experience. We, in many cases, elected them because they had maybe some sound judgment, but they used to at least know a little bit about the political system. And there is a sense in which you wonder about Donald Trump is so used to bringing kind of a business mindset where he says, do it, and everybody in his office, everybody in the Trump organization jumps. This time he's going to say, do it, and Congress is going to go, no, we're not. And that's going to be difficult. Carly Fiorina brings that same kind of business mindset. And then you have, of course, Ben Carson, who has really never even headed up anything that I know of, other than maybe, of course, his particular area of fetal neuro, or what's it called? I guess it's called neurophysiology, but it was in Johns Hopkins. And so there is a need to have a little bit more than just business background, I think, especially given the complexity of our government today. And so each one of them are trying to say, well, we know enough. Carly Fiorina talks about the fact she probably has sat across the table from more foreign leaders than anybody else. And, of course, Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and others want to explain that. Of course, Jeb Bush wants to say, well, had a father and a brother that were presidents. I think I know a little bit about what this entails. So, but it will be interesting. It's just going to be interesting to see how this plays out, but I think a little more experience is necessary, if for no other reason. The current occupant of the Oval Office and even some others in the past didn't have enough background in the government to be effective. Jimmy Carter seemed like he was way out of his league because he had been a governor of Georgia, not to minimize that, but had not spent a lot of time really preparing for that. Bill Clinton had a little bit of that same experience, having been a governor in Arkansas, and really was, I think, originally assuming he would run with the idea that he would be elected the next cycle, not that one. And so we've not done well sometimes when we've had individuals that have not understood a little bit more about the political process and understood some of the government agencies, and we're able to put together a team that's going to move this nation forward. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But right now, a lot of at least Republican voters are saying, no, I think I'll vote for Donald Trump. And I wouldn't have predicted that just a few months ago. If you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. Let's go to Georgia next. Richard, what would you like to say?
Oh, yeah. All right. Thanks for having me. I think Donald Trump is really speaking on some good things here. When you look at the unemployment rate for Americans, it's very high. In the state of Georgia, I'm noticing more and more Hispanics coming either illegally or with visas that are working every morning, and that state has a very high unemployment rate. So it's just kind of a double standard to me that, illegal aliens get this special treatment where Americans who have been here, all their lives aren't able to get the same treatments at all.
Well, and I think one of the things you might even say is that in this position paper by Donald Trump and his campaign, requirement to hire American workers first, and concerned about the fact that individuals coming here with an H-1B visa oftentimes get preference when 92 million Americans are not working. So I don't know what that means other than the few words there, but it seems to imply that you would give preference to American workers over foreign workers, even if they were here legally. It's an interesting concept, and it will be interesting to see if other campaigns pick up on it or whether that's only something that Donald Trump talks about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just think that what he's saying right now, it makes a lot of sense for what's the direction this country is going into with all the problems that Mexico is having. We all hear about it constantly in the news, and it's just a shame because American people should be taken care of first.
I think so. Richard, I appreciate your phone call. Let me take at least one or two more phone calls real quickly before we run out of time this hour. We'll continue some of this in the second hour. I'm also going to put some other issues on the table, but let's head out to Florida this time. Nathan, you have the floor.
Yes. I have an explanation of why all the politicians have dropped to the bottom, and Cruz and Rubio are up close to the people that are coming from real life. The politicians have marketed themselves to our hearts and not to our minds. And if you look at their especially Rubio and Cruz, they both voted for all of Barack Obama's, to confirm all of Barack Obama's gay activist judges. They spoke out against the court's rulings, but yet Article 1, Section 1 says it's their job to make law, not the courts, but they gain political points from it. More people are reading their Constitution and getting educated, and they're seeing through these people. Cruz voted for Barack Obama's Obamacare after he did a 21-hour filibuster. We've been heard. We got somebody in Washington fighting for us. I hate to say it this way, but he's a liar. All of them have lied. They're reaching our hearts and not our minds.
So, who would you vote for?
At this point, I haven't made up my mind because I don't know what the number is now. But as of last Monday, when I checked, there was 569 people running for president, and only the two parties voices are being heard. And here's the thing that I have to remember as I read the Constitution: there is no political parties, nor is there an electoral college in the Constitution. We got to get back to the Constitution, and what we know is the way it is, not the way it's supposed to be.
Well, again,
at this point, I know in 2010...
I would disagree with you on the Electoral College. That is exactly what they were trying to establish, something that disconnected the people running for the presidency from actual popular vote. If you're talking about the actual words, okay, I'll accept that. But that concept has been there since the very beginning from our founders. But we need to take a break, and when we come back, we'll take some more phone calls. If you would like to join our conversation today, we will take those calls, 1-800-351-1212. And you can find out a little bit more on our website about some of these issues that we have posted here today. And as I mentioned in the first hour, since we did some interview with Alex and Stephen Kendrick, and some of you have been calling off air to get some more information about the movie War Room. You can find most of it right there on our website, pointofview.net, or of course go to warroommovie.com. Either way, we'll get you some of that. And again, it's going to be, I think, a very powerful film by those who have produced films like Facing the Giants, Fireproof, Courageous, and of course now War Room, the whole powerful weapon of prayer. We've been talking about this for some time here on Point of View. But let's take a break, and when we come back, those of you on the line, stay with us. We'll get your calls right after these important messages.
What can you get for $5? In most cases, you can't even get a value meal at a fast food restaurant. But I'll tell you one thing $5 can do. If every listener to Point of View sent just $5 this week, believe it or not, and someone here did the math, Point of View could pay the bills for the next 3 years. That's what the number said. $5, 3 years. That's how many of you there are and how little it takes to keep us going. The problem is, most of our listeners have never contributed. Never. To make up for those who don't, others give large gifts, hundreds, even thousands, or monthly donations of $30, $65, $100. I don't know what you can do, but I encourage you to do what you can today, even if that's $5. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send your gift to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Thank you for doing your part for Point of View. Point of View will continue after this.
I just thank God for y'all. I listen to you every day, truly. I wanted to thank y'all for everything you do each day to inform Christian families and our community about the things we can do, and just the way you're so informative. I listen to you daily and love you guys and appreciate you so much.
God bless you, Kerby, for keeping this show so on track and for the decades of wonderful help to this nation that Point of View has been. We're all big fans of your work, and we pray that God will just prosper it.
As a Christian, over the years that I've followed this program, I am constantly challenged to be on guard and to evaluate what's going on. And if for no other reason, to protect the caliber and the truth of your programming, I need to participate and to back your program financially to ensure that the truth stays out there for people to hear, to view, and to be a part of.
This is Point of View Radio.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. First hour today, we spent a little bit of time talking with the Kendricks brother about their movie, I should say, War Room. And so, again, we had Alex Kendricks as well as Stephen Kendricks on, and I thought it would be great for you to take some time to learn a little bit more about that movie coming out. Then I read from the position paper by Donald Trump, and as I took a break, I thought of something. I thought one of the pieces I didn't find in this position paper was this idea of birthright citizenship. Went back, and it's in there. It just wasn't well highlighted. And if you're not familiar with this has been the question about whether or not an individual who is born here then automatically becomes a citizen. Now, this has always been somewhat controversial, and it's a good example of probably one of the only times where Kelly Shackelford and I have a slightly different position. His argument is that the 14th Amendment basically allows that any individual who is born here thus gets automatic citizenship. Now, a lot of Americans disagree with that, but I think it's important to recognize that there are a number of scholars that have questioned it as well. The 14th Amendment, if you're not familiar, says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. Now, the argument that people make is, well, that means if you're born here, you're automatically a citizen, even if your parents are not citizens. Well, if then you're a citizen, that allows us to have sort of chain migration and bring other individuals who were not here. But a lot of people say if you go back to look at the Civil Rights Act of 1866, which was really the basis for the language of the 14th Amendment, that was not the case, and it was never intended for anybody to actually gain citizenship simply by being born here. We can get into the technical arguments of all of that, but the reality is the Supreme Court and most courts have since then always accepted that. But this is one of those issues where, again, Donald Trump is challenging whether or not we should have birthright citizenship, which are oftentimes referred to, I think, derisively as anchor babies. So that's another issue to put on the table, but I also have a whole bank of calls from those of you that wanted to join the conversation. So let's go to California, KYCC. Is it Gerla? Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, it's Garla.
Garla, okay.
Thank you for taking my call. I was wondering, I haven't heard anywhere. I was wondering if you had heard, has Donald Trump ever voiced and volunteered what his faith is? Bible, Christian, prayer, anything like that?
I haven't heard much of it. Maybe some of our listeners can enlighten us in that regard, but I've always been a little bit puzzled by the fact that a fair number of people that say I support Donald Trump, I say, well, okay, where does he stand on some of these social issues? And well, I really don't care. Oh, well, okay, maybe you don't, but a lot of people have always felt like things like abortion and marriage and certainly issues of religious liberty and issues of decency, to mention just a few, would be really kind of important issues. You know, where do you stand on some of those topics? Do you accept the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage? Some of the other individuals that we mention who are states, U.S. senators like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio do not, obviously. Then they're in the top 5. Ben Carson, I would assume, does not. And Carly Fiorina kind of says, well, it's a settled law, and I think you get the sort of same argument from Donald Trump, and the rest go on from there. So it would be an important series of questions, and some of those questions surfaced in the debate, but the abortion question, if you remember, went to Marco Rubio. Some of the questions about how you would look at God came to people like Mike Huckabee and a few others. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays itself out, but it's a really important question. So, Garl, I appreciate you putting it on the table, and maybe we can begin to find out as the campaign unfolds. Let's take another phone call. We'll go to WLPE in Georgia. George, what would you like to add to the conversation today? I don't think I have George here. George, you there? Well, we'll put George on hold, and we'll go out to North Carolina and talk to James. James, what would you like to say?
Hey, thank you very much for having me on. I'm a big fan of your show. We're talking about the constitutionality of Donald Trump's policy, and we kind of forgot to mention Title VII, and it's directly impeding on the fact that we are discriminating on legal immigrants based on legal status. How is that? Can I get your opinion on that, or your thoughts?
Let me start the conversation, but I think you want to take it in a direction. But first of all, one of the things that I've said, and he doesn't really address this in the paper, but one of the things I've said before is we make illegal immigration a little too easy, and we certainly make legal immigration far too difficult. And so there are two issues. One, I think by increasing the number of ICE agents, not just for those on the border, but those to process fees and all sorts of other things. If you've ever listened to this program, you know that sometimes when we talk about immigration, we'll have people call in and they'll tell us horrendous stories. And I can remember some in the past of a person that came from Germany with excellent credentials, but just took forever to become a citizen. People from South Africa telling this story, people from Brazil telling the story, people from Canada and the UK from telling this. Go ahead.
Myself too. I mean, I've experienced the whole citizenship road, the path to citizenship. It's not as easy as most people say it is. It's very, very difficult. The lawyer fees. I mean, just to think about it. I mean, there's all sorts of loopholes that they make you go through. But jumping back on to the constitutionality of this policy, I mean, I'm curious to know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, and I'm not sure I'm picking up on what you're talking about in terms of that, so I'll fill in the blanks so that the rest of us can understand.
Yes, Title VII of the U.S. Constitution does not allow discrimination based on citizenship status, the same way that it does not allow discrimination based on religious creed, based on sexual race, sexual preference, that sort of thing. That's what I'm referring to.
Well, sure. And again, those are all having to do with kind of the Civil Rights Act. I assume that's what you're talking about there. Right. Yeah, 1964 Civil Rights Act. So how does that affect, or I'm missing something on terms of legal immigrants. Do you see that applying to the difference between legal and illegal immigrants, or where's the problem there?
So the problem is the legal immigrants, the green card holders, right, are being discriminated against because they're U.S. citizens are given preference. Although they may be qualified, they both may be qualified. They're given preference over.
I see.
Green card
Gotcha.
holders.
So you're having questions about his one where he would want to give preference to American workers first over those that have an H-1B visa. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah, and that may be a very significant challenge.
Green card holders.
Yeah.
And also it kind of seems like a lazy policy to me. If you want to create jobs, hey, why don't we just kick all the legal or illegal immigrants out and just give Americans jobs? That seems kind of like why don't we focus on the economic issues? Why don't we focus on, I mean, there's several steps, so.
Your point's well taken. And first of all, you raised very good points because, again, we need to create more jobs rather than just have this zero-sum game of saying, well, I'm going to prevent that individual that has a visa from having preference to that. And again, I think there's going to be some problems with that particular point in Donald Trump's platform, but that's why we have campaigns to sort it all out. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Christians have been called to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ and make disciples of all nations. Unfortunately, three powerful social forces in society undermine the effectiveness of the gospel in this country and around the world. Writers such as Peter Berger and Os Guinness have documented and described these forces. They are secularization, pluralization, and privatization. The first is secularization. It is the process by which sectors of society and culture are removed from the influence of religious institutions and symbols. A biblical description of secularization can be found in Romans 12:2. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Today, the forces of darkness raise up the arguments against the knowledge of God, which blunt the effectiveness of the gospel. A second social force is pluralization, which is the process that has increased the number of choices in the world. With so many choices, we do not know what is true. Ultimately, all truth and values become relative. People are taken captive by worldviews that are contrary to biblical teaching. Privatization is the third force. It occurs as a response to the previous two forces. It is the withdrawal from religious institutions and a retreat inward with an emphasis on self. It is what Christopher Lasch called an attempt at psychic survival. You know, the combined impact of these three forces on Christianity has to make it irrelevant, at least to the cultural and social aspects of society. Theodore Roszak once said that American Christianity is privately engaging, but socially irrelevant. So if Christians are to be effective in the 21st century, they must understand and counter these powerful forces. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Prayer is a powerful weapon. From Provident Films and Affirm Films comes War Room in theaters August 28. Rated PG. More information at warroomthemovie.com.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, if you'd like to join our conversation, 1-800-351-1212. I can see a few of you would like to talk about whether or not we need an experienced politician in office or whether or not being a non-candidate might actually be a plus. So let's look at a few of those calls and hear from you. George, WLPE. George, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View. Do we have you? I guess I'll put George on hold once again, and we'll go to Earl in Kentucky. Earl, what would you like to say?
I would like to say, first, it's a pleasure to get to talk to y'all, and that what you're missing there is that we stupid Americans are sick of politicians. That's why, and Dr. Carlson is appealing to us. You know, we're sick of all the law degrees in Washington D.C. we're sick of Do Nothing Boehner. We're sick of Do Nothing McConnell and all the others that are up there. It's the heartbeat of America y'all are missing.
Well, I don't think I'm missing it. I'm reporting it. That I'm a little surprised, though. I thought that somewhere in there would be a governor. Maybe it would be a Rick Perry or somebody like that. That actually also tends to be kind of, if you will, the darling of the Tea Party. But you're right. I mean, it's very obvious that when you look at the top five, you were talking about two senators, both who are relatively young and have, of course, the one missing, I would say, would be Rand Paul, because a lot of people think of him as really kind of challenging the establishment. So you got two senators, fairly young, not kind of career politicians who are really challenged the establishment. Then you have three non-politicians, Donald Trump and Ben Carson and Carly Fiorina. And I think so far the American people said, those are our choices. And the people that you are trying to foist upon us, various other governors and other politicians or people that have run in the past, they just don't appeal to us. So we're just not into politicians anymore, and that seems to be the answer that comes from at least the most recent survey. So I think I understand it only so well, and I think maybe mainstream America and maybe Wall Street and maybe the Republican establishment need to understand it pretty soon.
Yes, that's Boehner and McCall nickname now is Do Nothing.
Do nothing. Well, we'll call them Do Nothing politicians.
Every now and then.
Yeah.
They make a token appearance every now on TV and give a little bit of a speech, but we haven't seen them do anything.
Well, and again, I think that's where the American people are on a lot of those issues. So, Earl, I appreciate you calling in. Giorgio, I want to try one more time. Let's see if you're there.
Yes,
Gotcha.
Yes, sir, you do.
Okay. What would you like to
Kirby,
add?
Well, Kirby, I want to go back a little. I was just astounded when you agreed with a caller that said people need to have political experience to be president. That has not worked out for us. It's been terrible. We need Donald Trump, Carly Fiorina, any of them would be so much better than what we've got now. And Barack Obama has proven to you, you do not have to work with Congress. You do not even have to have them.
I know. I'm hoping that we will have at least a candidate that believes in the Constitution, because it's pretty obvious that we are dealing with that.
They believe in it, but now they're going to have to take a strong stand, and we're going to need somebody real radical. This is our last chance. We either get somebody for America this time, or from now on the liberals will have it forever. This is the last time that a Republican can win an election.
And it's going to be an uphill fight even to win this election. Again, the idea of political experiences, I just think they need to have some basics. They need to know, for example, can you even name all the cabinet offices? Do you even know what kind of constitutional authority you have? Those are some basic kinds of things that you would hope somebody would understand. But again, a lot of this is going to depend not just on who sits in that Oval Office, but who that individual puts in positions of authority. Because as I've said before, as important it is to have a person of character in the Oval Office who has the right stand, it's even more important to figure out who they're going to put in positions of authority, who are going to be in those cabinet offices, who's going to be your national security advisor, and all of the rest, because so many of those decisions in such a large government are now being made by individuals that are kind of second tier, and so we need to know about that as well. Let me just, before I take another phone call, add one more thing to the mix. I think Donald Trump is right about a lot of things. He's right about the frustration of the American people. He's right about this issue of immigration. And he's right about something else, and nobody's given him credit for, so I give him credit. He has said, if I'm elected, I am not running against Hillary Clinton. I'm going to be running against Joe Biden. Now, most people just go, whatever. Even today, front page USA Today, Biden poses a threat to Clinton. And as we've said before, Hillary Clinton right now is running two races. One is a race to the White House, but the other race is a race to stay one step ahead of the investigators. And every single day, it's another shoe drop of something else we found out that happened when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State. And so I'm, again, going to say that I think it is quite possible that whoever is the Republican nominee, and it could be Donald Trump, or it could be Ted Cruz, or all sorts of other people, will be running not against Hillary Clinton, but will be running against Joe Biden. And so, again, I think Donald Trump was right when he made that statement, and even looking at the front page of USA Today illustrates maybe that's the case. Let's take some more phone calls. I'll take as many calls as we can before we get into our conversation this last half hour on the issue of sex and violence that we're going to be talking about with an individual with the Parents Television Council. So we'll go out to Texas, KCTA. Roseanne, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. I wonder, it looked like Donald Trump and Jeb Bush were the ones that were occupying most of the time on the media. In the newspaper and in the television, they seemed to be the ones that were ahead even before anybody took any polls. I worry about Donald Trump because he can't even get through an hour without insulting somebody on stage. How is he going to be in foreign policy?
Well, and I think the argument is being made that, okay, he's got a lot of rough edges and maybe a few of those will smooth out. And it will be okay. But it'll be interesting to see because most people did not expect him to do as well as long as he has. Now, again, let me add one disclaimer. 8 years ago at this time, the person leading the polls in the Republican primaries, Rudy Giuliani. Number 2 was Fred Thompson. How'd that work out? Well, there's a long time between now and the first caucus and the first primary. But that being said, Donald Trump has a lot more going for him than even those two candidates did, and that's called money and the ability to pretty much say what he wants to say without offending individuals. And there are only a few of these candidates that we're talking about here that have the financial resources to get to the end zone, to get to the finish line. Ted Cruz is another one. As much as I like Ben Carson and have had him on this program and have shared a stage with him, as much as I like Mike Huckabee and have gotten to know him very well over the years and shared a stage with him, as much as we've enjoyed having people like Rick Santorum on the program, I just don't see that they have the financial wherewithal to stay in the fight much longer. But I could be wrong, and there could be some major benefactor that comes along and does so, but we will see. And Roseanne, the question that you're asking is a question a lot of people are asking. Okay, this is really getting to be quite an interesting set of circumstances. But again, as you've heard many of our other listeners say, and I'm going to go to another one that probably say the same thing, we are tired of politicians. We just want a chance to have somebody tell people what they really think without trying to always be politically correct. So let me go to South Carolina real quickly. WAGP. We're coming up to a break, but Dennis, you have the floor. What would you like to say to everybody?
I think people are sick of politicians, but I think it goes a lot deeper than that. I think people feel like something's wrong, like their vote is important, but it's compromised. And it's compromised by people who know how to make things happen the way they want them to happen, in spite of what the will of the people is, and that's true all over the place. I was watching a Ted Koppel show a long time ago, having an argument with my father about who's who and what's what, and I had this newspaper that listed all the people who were prominent in news and whatnot, and that were members of the Committee on Foreign Relations. And here's Ted Koppel with 2 liberals and 2 conservatives arguing over some point. Don't remember what it was, but the important point here is they were all members of the Committee on Foreign Relations.
Yeah. Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, yeah.
CFR,
yes.
Council on Foreign Relations, yeah. I just think there's a lack of belief that a politician is going to really do what he says, even if he wants to.
Sure. And the point you just made, and since we're coming to a break, I'll make that. I would love to know right now where some of these candidates stand or who they would put as their Secretary of Defense or Secretary of State, and if we're just going to pull from the same old groups like Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, where no changes are going to take place. And I think one theme that's run through all these 9 phone calls, we all think we need some change. We'll be right back.
Imagine you're in a room with 99 other people, 100 of you total. All of you listen to point of view. You have that in common. What you don't have in common is that only one of you, actually less than 1 in 100, has ever supported the work of Point of View. That's what a recent study showed. 1 in 100, fewer than 1% have given, 99% have not. You listen. So I know you appreciate what this program provides. Now, I invite you to move from the big group to the little one. If 1/3, 33% of those listening gives just $5 this week, we could fully fund Point of View for a year, 12 months. Not everyone will, not everyone can, but can you give $5 today, or maybe $55 or $105? Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net, pointofview.net, or send your gift to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221, Box 30, Dallas 75221. Join the few, the thankful. Support Point of View. Point of View will continue after this.
for listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
As I started the program, I spent a little bit of time saying that our theme today is sort of media. We spent the first half hour talking about the movie War Room with both Alex Kendrick and Stephen Kendrick, and that is a movie, again, that I would commend to your family, PG, and it's going to be released on August 28th, and I would encourage you and your church and friends all to go to it. In this last half hour, we're going to talk about media again. We kind of interrupted those two conversations about media with some conversation about Donald Trump and his release of his position paper on immigration. But we really want to now get into this issue of what's worse, sex or violence. And you wouldn't think that would even be a question, because I think all of us as listeners would say both, as well as profanity and pornography and all sorts of various kind of worldview content. But it has been interesting. Recently, there have been some people raising some questions. This may be the only time you're going to hear me quote from Miley Cyrus, but she wants to know why sex is more taboo than violence, and I thought it would be a great conversation to have with Melissa Henson. Melissa Henson is the director of Grassroots Education and Advocacy for the Parents Television Council. As an individual working in that, she actually directs a network of various volunteers and trains local grassroots chapters around the country. She also directs the organization's Advertiser Accountability Campaign. And when she first joined with PTC, she actually was involved as an entertainment analyst documenting various instances of inappropriate content on television. She has a bachelor's degree in government from the University of Virginia and joins us now by phone. Melissa, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
Let's, if we can, get into this issue because it is interesting. I did post one of the articles you referred to in your blog post, and that was one that was in the Washington Post. But you can go to People Magazine, you can go to ABC News, and it seems right now everybody's saying, well, we might say violence is wrong. That's a level of visual violence. But that's, one thing. Sex is quite another. And for people that have traveled to other countries, and I have, you turn on the television set and you go, okay, I didn't expect that. I thought there would be a little more censorship of some of these visual sexual images that show up in Canadian television, on the UK or in the European continent. So let's get into that. You've really had desire to try to combat sex, violence, and profanity. What about all these conversations taking place right now?
Yeah, well, I think what really started it all off was Miley Cyrus made some comments in an interview, I think it was Marie Claire magazine, where she was basically saying, hey, why is everybody criticizing me and attacking me for expressing my sexuality in my onstage performance or my music videos, and all these other performers are including references to or depictions of violence in their videos, and nobody says anything. Well, I think the reality is that we need to be having both conversations because there is substantial evidence now that both kinds of media content can be harmful to kids. We have, 50 years of research now showing that kids who are exposed to high levels of violence on television or in other media are more likely to be aggressive or have problems later in life. And there is a more recent but growing body of research that also shows that kids who are exposed to high levels of sexuality in the media are more likely to experience problems or have life experiences that I think many parents would wish to help their children avoid, things like unplanned pregnancies or a higher number of sex partners over the course of the lifetime. So both are important, both are impacting kids, and both need to be carefully looked at.
One of the articles that we've posted, actually we've posted quite a few, is your blog post that came from, again, the work that is done at Parents Television Council. And let's talk violence first, because there you have a link showing that your research has found that, first of all, there's way too much violence on television. I think you don't even need a study to figure that out. Just ask any mom that has a TV set in the home. But then you've also found that the volume and degree of violent content between these two different entities, broadcast and cable, is almost indistinguishable. The argument used to be from the FCC was, if you get cable, you know what you're getting yourself into, and certain cable channels will actually push the envelope. But broadcast TV, there's always supposed to have been some kind of, if you will, unwritten covenant between the broadcasters and the parents that we're not going to expose your children to those kinds of violent episodes. But that seems to have broken down.
Yeah, it certainly has. And what's ironic is that the broadcast networks are citing competition from cable as a justification for sort of pushing the envelope in that way, in spite of the fact that the broadcast networks are usually owned by the same companies that own the cable networks they're supposedly competing against. So you have 4 or 5 huge media conglomerates that are controlling 99% of what we're watching. And so for a channel like CBS to say, hey, we need to be more explicit with the sexual content, or we need to be more graphic with violence because we have to compete with what they're able to show on Cinemax. Well, that's absurd because at the end of the day, the money's going to the same parent company.
Wow. Good point. Let's talk about that for just a minute. A lot of people might say, well, I grew up and watched Gunsmoke, or I watched various shows. I might even seen MASH, and so that didn't turn me into a serial killer or a violent individual. So why should I be concerned about violent images on television today with my kids?
Yeah, we hear that an awful lot. And I think what that argument fails to recognize is that media violence today is both qualitatively and quantitatively different from what it was in the 50s and 60s and 70s. I mean, you could go back and look at some of those old TV westerns, and you might see somebody fire a cap gun, and then a moment later you'd see a body lying there on the pavement, and you can assume that the bullet hit the body and the person was killed. Today, what you're more likely to see is the bullets discharging from the gun, and the camera follows the bullet as it speeds through the air, and then they zoom in as the bullet makes impact with the body and cuts through flesh, and you see the blood spraying out. I mean, it's far more realistic and far more graphic than what they were able to do, and that's been facilitated by advances in, computer graphics and modeling technology and so forth. So they're able to be much more accurate and much more realistic with violence. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is that if you look back at the old TV code of conduct, it would stipulate things like violence should not be shown in a graphic nature, or doing violent things, except, in defense of self-defense or to protect women or children. You don't glorify the violent acts in any way. And what we have in recent years is the rise of the criminal protagonist, the bad guy that you're supposed to feel empathy with. So, Tony Soprano on down the line, Dexter, the more likely it is that it's going to become a learned behavior.
Wow, very good. Let's get to the other question. Miley Cyrus wants to know why sex is more taboo than violence. What about the sexual images there? I've seen that even the American Association of Pediatrics is saying that if you indeed see lots of sexual images on television, that those individuals seem to correlate with those people that watch lots of those sexual images. They're more likely to be sexually involved, more likely to even, girls are more likely to be pregnant. It seems to me that we have a body of research that says that showing that much sex on television actually affects behavior in some very negative ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You're exactly right about what the research shows. And there was a professor at the University of North Carolina who expressed it this way, and I think it's the perfect way to express it. She said, television is a sexual super peer. So if you think about peer pressure and the kind of influence that it exerts on teenagers, TV amplifies that to the 10th or the 100th degree, because it takes behaviors that, sure, they exist out there, but it makes them seem more common. And so what we're seeing is, 12-year-old girls these days becoming sexually active, and not only that, but they're asked to engage in behavior that used to be exclusively the dominion of pornography, because this is what the boys in their class are seeing, and this is what they're expecting girls to do, and how they're expecting the girls to behave. So TV is a sexual super peer, and it's informing kids' attitudes and beliefs and behaviors about how sexually active their peers are, what kind of behavior is expected of them, how far they're expected to go, and so forth.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll take some of your phone calls, 1-800-351-1212. Perhaps you have some comments about the amount of sex and violence on television, and we also want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the great resources there at the Parents Television Council. We have posted quite a number of articles, the blog post from the Parents Television Council, What is Worse, Sex or Violence? Then one of the pieces that appeared in the Washington Post, Miley Cyrus wants to know why sex is more taboo than violence, and so I would encourage you to read some of those and maybe even post those on your Facebook page or send out a tweet for your Twitter account. Just get some conversation going. But if you'd like to join the conversation, 1-800-351-1212. We'll continue our conversation with Melissa Henson right after this.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back for a few more minutes. If you'd like to join us real quickly, 1-800-351-1212. Melissa Henson with us, and again, she is the Director of Grassroots Education, the Parents Television Council. Just a minute ago, you used that phrase from Professor Jane Brown, who's at North Carolina, sexual super peer. You know, Melissa, most people think of peer groups, and one of the big challenges for parents, it's always been a challenge, but especially in the 21st century, is to make sure that your kids are with the right peer group. And how many times have we heard that if we can get the right kids around our kids, we have less problems? And the scriptures talk about the fact that bad company corrupts good morals. So that is the case. But in some respects, television, and let's expand it now, social media it's generally becoming the new peer group. And young people are learning about values and about sexuality now through the media, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely correct. In fact, it's rather staggering, the accounts that you see more and more of these days of kids. They might be right next to the person they're talking to they're texting on the phone, so they're engaging almost exclusively with others through electronics rather than face to face. And the fact that so many kids are connected to these mobile devices, smartphones, tablets, etc. And a lot of schools these days even require them. And so it makes it so much harder for us as parents to keep tabs on what kind of influences and media content our kids are exposed to. You know, it's a different time from when there was only one TV set in the house and it was in the family room, and you could see what was on the TV all the time. Nowadays, kids are able to stream content over their phones. You know, they're accessing content away from home, and so it's very, very difficult for us as parents to know exactly what our kids are being exposed to and what influences are shaping their attitudes and beliefs and behaviors.
Well, again, this idea of sexual super peer, you know, this is a peer group influence. Let's take a different one. Role model. Again, I found that if I can really get my kids, or eventually I might have grandkids, to begin to want to emulate positive role models, that's the case. But what happens when television portrays somebody who is attractive, popular, confident, who's also sexually active? It seems to send a message that a lot of young people are picking up on, that if I want to be more confident and be well thought of, being sexual active is part of that dynamic.
Yeah, and that's part of what they mean by a super peer, because it is taking these unrealistic standards for beauty. I mean, quite often the teenage characters you see depicted in movies or on television are actually played by adults. So, you know, for starters, no teenager is going to look like the kids in the movies or the kids on TV, because those aren't actually kids to begin with. And beyond that, they're being photoshopped and manipulated in 100 different ways. You know, they have a staff of writers coming up with these clever words that are coming out of their mouths. So it's a very unrealistic standard, and yet it's the standard by which so many kids judge themselves, and that's so unfair. And I think the best antidote to that is really for parents to try to engage as much as possible with their kids. And encourage them to watch shows that reflect the kind of values or exemplify the kind of values they want their kids to pick up on. And you know, I think we often take for granted I guess the notion that our kids stop listening to us once they hit the teen years, that they're only listening to their peers. And maybe our kids are even saying that to us, but they are still looking to us for guidance and to help them to make the right choices. Sometimes they want us to play bad cop so they can say no when they're invited to a party they don't really want to go to, or if they know something bad is going to be happening there. So they need us to be that gatekeeper for them.
I think so. You know, that's one of the studies that we did with George Barna that found the same kind of thing, that even when kids say, I don't want parental influence, they later on admit that the parental influence was perhaps one of the most significant things in keeping them from making a mistake. And for people that maybe doubt, Melissa, that this is having an impact, I saw this one study that talked about the fact that when they surveyed basically teenagers early in, you know, kind of the preteen and early teen years, they found that at least a third of them said that the media encourages them to have sex because it makes it seem like everybody does it. And I remember speaking at a youth conference years ago, and this one kid was honest enough. He said, you know, after watching television, I was after a while convinced I was the only virgin in America. So again, these images are having an impact on young people, and that's why parents need to take some control.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would go even a step farther than that. Not only does it make it seem like everybody's doing it, but it also makes it seem like it's always fun. It's always, you know, totally consensual, that there are never any negative consequences. I mean, how often do you have characters on TV dealing with an STD or dealing with an unplanned pregnancy? It's always risk and consequence free.
Well, again, let
on
me just
television.
encourage people, just before I let you go to some of the resources which we have made available today. And if they click on your picture, that will take you to, again, Parents Television Council. It's w2.parentstv.org. But again, we have the links there, and there are some great family guides, various campaigns, and other things. So just before I let you go, talk about some of the resources that people find when they go to Parents Television Council.
Yeah, thanks. We have links to a number of academic and scientific studies that talk about some of these issues that we've been discussing today. We've got a parent toolkit, which has tips for engaging with your kids on media, for setting standards in your house, for establishing media rules in your house. We've got a family viewing guide for family-friendly entertainment that you can watch with your kids. So there's a lot of resources, and also tools for activism. We always say silence gives consent. We're not out there speaking out in opposition to the things we see as wrong. We're tacitly consenting to it. So I would encourage folks to get involved and speak out.
Well, again, thank you for the good work you're doing at Parents Television Council. Let's do it again sometime.
All right, thank you.
That's all we have for today. We started off, as I said, by talking about the positive, ended on the negative. We could have reversed it, but that's just the way it turned out, and spent some time talking about a positive film, that is War Room, which I think you're going to want to know more about, and you can do so by going to our website or to their website, warroommovie.com. It's coming to the theaters August 28th. I really do encourage you to send a positive signal to Hollywood and to other film producers, but at the same time, if you're saying, I'm really concerned about what my kids or my grandkids are seeing on television and in the movies, Parents Television Council has a lot of great research, and I thought this particular blog post, what's worse, sex or violence? Well, I don't think we have to choose, and Miley Cyrus wants to know why sex is more taboo than violence. Well, actually, both of them are, and I think we should be concerned about that. So, Miley, if you need an answer, let's just look at some of the research that has been done over the years by the Parents Television Council, by other researchers in refereed journals, to say that what we're showing on television right now is not really good for kids, and it's certainly not good for families and marriages. So that's why we encourage you to have some level of discernment. Now, tomorrow we're going to spend a little bit of time talking with Alan Dershowitz. He's only been on this program once before, but he has a new book out. It's already kind of in ebook form, which is he's starting to do more and more. The Case Against the Deal with Iran, How We Can Stop Iran from Getting Nukes. And so we're going to spend some time with him. Then we're going to get back to it. One of the callers mentioned the idea about these elections, and I didn't get to it today, but there are people at the ACLU, especially in Rhode Island right now, challenging the photo ID laws there and in other states. And I wanted to get back to that because that's another big issue in this upcoming campaign. And of course, we're going to pay attention to not only the Donald Trump, but Joe Biden, who looks like he's jumping into the race, and that's going to change all sorts of things. So there will be lots that we will be following as well. Got a lot more to say about Planned Parenthood, but we've got lots of time to do that, and so we'll do that in upcoming programs, perhaps tomorrow. If you'd like to know more about all the things we've talked about, please visit the website, pointofview.net. All those resources are available to you, and we'd like to get them in your hands so that you can be more effective. Andrew, Catherine, and Chris, thank you for your help. Have a good day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
If you've been a Christian for any length of time, no doubt you've heard about Jesus feeding thousands with a few loaves of bread and a couple of fish. Jesus took something small and turned it into something big. Recently, someone here at Point of View made an interesting discovery. He did some math and figured out that according to the number of faithful listeners we have, if you and every other listener gave $5, it would help Kerby and the team bring you interviews and commentary for not 3 months, but 3 years. You heard me right. If every listener donates just $5, we'd pay what it costs to bring you this needed information for 3 years. And if you urge a friend to join you, you send 5, they send 5, well, you can imagine the impact. Click the Donate Now button at pointofview.net. Pointofview.net, or send $5 to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Send $5. Urge a friend to join you. Support Point of View. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.